Krishna Mataji.
Our humble obeisance as well, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Yes, Hare Krishna. Hare
Need to mute Mataji. Something is muted there. All right. So today we are continuing our Ramayana reading, and we are doing sad farewells. Let me see if I can move this a little bit.
Yes, chapter 10, sad farewells.
Let me record it.
Recording in progress.
You may proceed, Guru Maharaj.
It was time for Rama and his two companions to say their farewells. Holding their weapons and followed by Sita, the brothers made their way towards Datharatha's palace. As they passed along the road, many men crowded around to watch them. Plunged in sorrow at seeing their beloved prince leaving, they lamented in various ways. Here passes the same Rama who before would have regally in state, followed by a huge retinue, said the people. Now he walks with only Sita and Lakshman as his companions. Although used to every luxury, he is going to the terrible forest in obedience to his father's word. Some citizens censored the king, whom they felt had been gripped by some evil spirit. How could he send his dearest son into exile? Rama's qualities were evident to all: his compassion, learning, gentleness, sense control, and mental peace, all were ever visible in that noble prince. The citizens could not face the prospect of Rama's departure. They felt pain, just as a tree with all its fruits and flowers is hurt when its root is damaged. And they spoke out in public places. We will give up our homes and villages and go with the pious Rama to the forest. Let us share with him all his joys and sorrows. Let Kaikeyi rule over a deserted kingdom, bereft of its people. Everyone feared the prospect of Kaikeyi becoming powerful as the mother of the king. They angrily cursed her again and again. All of them would go with Rama. They would abandon the city, leaving its house to be filled with dust and overrun by mice. The forest would become a city, and Ayodhya a forest. They would drive out from the forest all the fierce animals and snakes, sending them to live in Ayodhya with Kaikeyi as their protector. The two brothers heard the laments of the people, but they kept their minds under strict control. Smiling gently and glancing with affection at the citizens, they walked together like a pair of powerful lions. They entered Dasarathi's palace and saw Sumantra, who stood with folded hands and a disconsolate face. Rama asked him to announce their arrival to the king. When Sumantra went before Datharath, he found the king distracted by grief, heaving deep sighs, his eyes red from weeping. The devoted and faithful Sumantra regarded his master to be like the eclipsed sun or a fire covered by ashes. Bowing at the king's feet, Sumantra said, "The illustrious Rama has distributed all his wealth to his dependents and the Brahmanas, and he now stands at your door awaiting your permission to depart for the forest." Ordering his minister to show Rama in, the king asked that all his wives be present. Sumantra brought the queens, who arrived accompanied by numerous maidservants. He then brought Rama and Lakshman before their father. As Rama entered the room, Dasarath ran impulsively towards him, but being stricken with sorrow, he fell senseless to the floor. Rama and Lakshman rushed to assist their unconscious father. All the ladies threw up their arms and gave out a wail which mixed with the tinkling of their ornaments. A commotion filled the room with cries of, "Alas, alas, O Rama!" Kaikeyi alone remained unmoved. Rama and Lakshman, both crying, lifted their father and placed him gently on a couch. As the king returned to consciousness, Ram regained his composure and with folded hands said, "I have come to take leave of you, father. Please grant me your permission to go to the forest. Also allow Lakshman and Sita, whom I could not deter even with great effort, to accompany me. O great king, please give up your grief and look favorably upon us, for we wish now to depart." Rama calmly awaited his father's permission. The king spoke with difficulty. "As a result of a promise made to Kaikeyi, I have lost my good sense. Therefore, my dear Rama, take me captive and rule over this kingdom." Fixed in righteousness, Ram replied, "May you rule the earth for another 1,000 years. I have no desire for sovereignty. After a mere 14 years have passed, I shall return, and once more shall hold of your feet, having redeemed your pledge, O ruler of men." Dasarath was mortified, but he saw Kaikeyi urging him with covert gestures. Bound by the fetters of truth, he spoke to his son, granting him permission to leave. "Please leave with an undisturbed mind, O Rama, and may your journey be a safe and happy one." The king was devastated. He could not see that Rama's decision to depart was firm and not to be reversed. Rama was devoted to piety and truth. Dasarath requested him to remain for just one night so that he and Kaushalya might see him a little longer. He wanted to offer Rama all enjoyable things on that last day. Trembling with grief, the king said, "I swear to you that I never wanted this to happen. I've been obliged by Kaikeyi, who has abandoned virtue after long concealing her evil intentions. Your willingness to accept even this terrible order simply to save me from sin proves beyond doubt your greatness. O gentle Rama, I permit you to leave. Only go tomorrow with my blessings." Hearing of his father's request, Rama became concerned. He did not wish to delay his departure any longer and said, "Who will offer me tomorrow the delights I enjoy today? The time for my departure has come, and I must now cast aside all thoughts of enjoyment. Let me leave right away. Make over this vast kingdom with all its riches to Bharat. My resolution to live in the forest cannot be swayed. Your boons to Kaikeyi should now be implemented in full. I shall live with ascetics for 14 years, and the world should be given to Bharat. Rama moved closer to his anguished father, who sat shaking his head. He asked the king to be firm and free from sorrow. Rama assured his father that he had no desire at all for the kingdom, nor for any pleasures, nor even for life itself devoid of virtue. He only wished to execute the king's command and prove him true to his word. Confronting the grieving monarch, Rama said, "Since Kaikeyi said to me, 'Go to the forest, O Raghava,' and I replied by saying, 'I am going,' I must now redeem that pledge. Please let me leave. I cannot wait an instant longer." Rama felt sorrow to see his father suffering such intense agony. Not wanting to increase his father's pain, however, Rama kept his own feelings in check and maintained a calm expression. He spoke gently, assuring his father that he would certainly enjoy his stay in the forest. He would sport happily with Sita in the many delightful woods and groves. Protected by his own weapons and by Lakshman, there would be no fear for them from the beasts and Rakshasas in the forest. When 14 years had passed, the king would find them returned unharmed and ready to serve him again. Bharat alone could competently and righteously rule the globe in his absence. Rama added, "I shall never accept the kingdom by bringing infamy to you, O king. Indeed, I could renounce every pleasure, including my own dear wife, in order to satisfy your command. I shall only be happy the moment I enter the forest. You need not feel any pain for me. Be peaceful, my lord, and allow me to leave." Dasarath, tormented by a burning agony, embraced Rama tightly and then again fell unconscious, showing no signs of life. All the queens, along with their maidservants, cried loudly. Kaikeyi felt her purpose fulfilled and was rejoicing inwardly. Witnessing her silence, the king's intimate friend Sumantra was furious. Beating his head, wringing his hands and grinding his teeth, he spoke scathingly to her, his eyes blazing with wrath. "Here lies your husband, the support of the whole world, betrayed and forsaken by you, O queen. Surely there is nothing sacred for you. I consider you to be the murderess of your husband and the destroyer of your entire race. Do not despise your Lord in this way, for his order is superior to that of even 1,000,000 sons. Ignoring the time-honored rule of primogeniture, you seek to usurp Ram's right and bring unbearable pain to the king." Tears flowed from the old minister's eyes as he spoke. He told Kaikeyi to renounce her evil aim. If her son became the king, then no pious man would remain in the kingdom. What joy would she derive from ruling the empty earth, which was earned through sin? It was a great wonder that the earth did not split apart and swallow her, or that the great sages did not utter fiery curses to consume her on that very spot. Having served the king all his life, Sumantra felt every pain the king felt as if it were his own. As he addressed Kaikeyi, he could hardly bring himself to look at her. The glorious king will never belly his promise to you. Do not force him to perform an act repugnant to himself and the whole world. Follow the desire of the king and become a protectress of the world. Let Rama be installed on the throne. He will undoubtedly always remain favorable to you in every way. If, however, on your order he is sent to the forest, then your only gain will be unending infamy. Give up your misguided desire, O Kaikeyi, and live happily. Kaikeyi looked coolly at Sumantra, who stood before her with joined palms, and she made no reply. Her mind remained unmoved as she awaited the execution of her order. Seeing her resolve, Dasarath, who had regained consciousness, sighed and said to Sumantra, "You should immediately order my army to make ready to depart. They should accompany Rama to the forest. So too should wealthy merchants skilled at establishing networks of shops. Search out hunters who know the secrets of forests and send them with Rama. Assemble thousands of capable servants and have them prepared to leave. Indeed, you should arrange for my entire treasury and my granary to be transported along with Rama. He should not have to endure any austerity during the 14 years of exile." As Dathara spoke, Kaikeyi became alarmed. The king was going to divert the kingdom of all its wealth before her son was crowned. Dismayed and fearful, she turned towards Dathara and spoke, her mouth parched and her voice choked. "How can you bestow upon Bharat a kingdom stripped of its wealth? How then will he actually be the ruler of the world as you have promised?" The king turned angrily towards Kaikeyi. "After handing me a heavy burden to bear, you are now lashing me as I carry it. O hostile and vulgar woman! When asking for your boons, you should have stipulated that Rama could not take anything with him to the forest. Abandoning all sense of righteousness, you have taken to a path leading only to grief. I cannot stay here with you any longer. Along with all the people of Ayodhya, I shall follow Rama to the forest." Rama approached his father and said politely, "O great king, of what use to me is an army and all your riches? I have renounced the kingdom. How then can I take its wealth? He who has parted with an elephant yet seeks to retain its tether is simply a fool. I am resolved to enter the forest and dwell there with the ascetics, wearing the barks of trees and living on whatever produce I can glean from day to day." Rama wanted to act only in accord with the scriptural injunctions regarding the vow of forest life. He told his father that one living in the forest should not do so in great opulence. Rama asked that the king not bestow upon his brother a kingdom bereft of its riches. He would leave with only his weapons and a spade for digging roots. Turning to the king's servants, Rama said, "Bring me the 3 barks, and I shall take off these royal garments and make ready to depart." His request so gladdened Kaikeyi that she personally fetched the Spartan forest clothes made from barks and grasses she had already prepared. Shamelessly handing them to Rama, Lakshman and Sita, she said, "Put these on." Rama and Lakshman quickly and adroitly changed into those clothes. But the beautiful Sita was perplexed, unsure of how to wear them. Trying again and again to place the bark linen over her other clothes, Sita felt abashed. With her eyes flooded with tears, she said to her husband, "How does one wear such dress, my lord?" Rama personally fastened the tree bark over Sita's silk dress. Seeing her clad in forest apparel, her many female servants began to wail piteously. "This noble princess has not been ordered to enter the forest," they cried. "Dear Rama, please let her remain here with us, so we may continue to serve her and enjoy the blessing of seeing her divine form. How can this gentle lady live like an ascetic in the forest? She does not deserve to suffer in this way." All right, someone like to read?
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Does anyone want to read? Just use the raise hand function. Okay, I shall continue in order not to waste time. And anyone who'd like to read, just use the raise hand function. Although hearing their living remonstrances, Rama continued to tie on Sita's forest clothes as she desired. Suddenly, Vashishta became overwhelmed with distress at seeing the gentle Sita about to enter the forest. Feeling angered and weak with hot tears, he said to Kaikeyi, "O cruel woman, have you no shame? After deceiving the king and bringing disgrace to your family, are you still not satisfied? Will you stand by and watch as this high-born lady leaves for the forest, wearing the coarse garments you prepared? You did not ask that she be exiled along with Rama. These 3 barks are not meant for her. Excellent garments and jewels should be brought by you for your daughter-in-law. She should proceed to the forest on first-class conveyances and accompanied by all her servants." Vashishta loved Rama and Sita like his own children. He could not stand and watch as they departed, while the hard-hearted Kaikeyi looked on gleefully. The sage spoke words which pierced Kaikeyi deeply. He explained that according to scripture, the wife was her husband's own self. They were one and the same person. As such, Sita should therefore rule over the kingdom even if Rama himself could not. The forest would become the capital of the world. Indeed, the entire state of Koshala, along with all its people and the city of Ayodhya, would leave along with Rama. The sage blazed with anger as he went on, appearing like a smokeless fire. Surely Bharata and his brother Satrughna will also enter the forest, clad in barks. You may then rule over a desolate kingdom, peopled only by trees, which alone could not rise up and follow Rama. Kaikeyi remained silent and looked at Rama and Sita, who were ready to leave. Sita wished only to follow her husband. Even upon hearing Vashishta's words, she was not swayed in the least from her purpose. She stood next to Rama, covered from head to toe in the grass and bark clothes given by Kaikeyi. All the people present then loudly exclaimed, "Shame upon the powerless king, who does nothing to stop this flagrant injustice." Hearing their cries, the emperor became dispirited and lost interest in life. He turned to Kaikeyi and rebuked her for making Sita wear forest garments, but the queen remained silent. Rama came before his father. who sat with his head bent low, and asked his permission to leave. He requested the king to take special care of Kaushalya, whom he feared would suffer in his absence. Looking at his son clad in the dress of hermit, the king fell unconscious. After being brought to his senses by his ministers, who gently sprinkled him with cool water, Dasharatha lamented loudly. I think in my past life I must have given terrible pain to other living beings, and thus this pain is now being felt by me. Surely life will not leave one until the appointed time arrives. Otherwise, why does death not claim me now, who am tormented by Kaikeyi and beholding my dearest son bearing the robes of an ascetic? Crying out, O Rama, the king broke off, choked with tears. With a great effort, Dasharatha then managed to control his grief, and turning towards Sumantra, he said, "Fetch here the best of my chariots and take the glorious Rama beyond the city. Since I see a virtuous and valiant son being exiled into the forest by his own father and mother, I can only conclude that this is the result of piety as declared by the scriptures. Religion is undoubtedly difficult to divine." As Rama and Sita approached the chariot brought by Sumantra, Kaushalya came and tightly embraced Sita, saying, "Wicked are those women who forsake their worthy husbands when fallen upon hard times. Even though such women have in the past been protected and afforded every happiness, they malign and even desert their husbands when misfortune arrives. Such women are heartless, untruthful, lusty, and sinful by nature, being quickly estranged in times of trouble. Neither kindness, nor education, nor gift, nor even marriage ties can capture the hearts of these women." Kaushalya loved Sita as a daughter. She knew that Rama's gentle wife was entirely devoted to piety, and she spoke to her only out of motherly affection. She continued, "For virtuous women who are truthful, pious, obedient to their elders, and acting within the bounds of morality, the husband is the most sacred object and is never abandoned. Although Rama is being sent to the forest, you should never neglect him, dear Sita. Whether wealthy or without any means whatsoever, he is always your worshipable deity." Sita was filled with joy to hear this advice, which was in accord with her life's aim. Joining her palms, she repeated reverentially, "I shall surely do all that your honorable self instructs. I've always heard from you proper advice about how to serve my husband. Even in thought, you should not compare me to wicked women, for I am unable to deviate from virtue, even as moonlight cannot be parted from the moon. As a lute is useless without its strings, or chariot without its wheel, so a wife is destitute when separated from her worthy husband. Having learned from my elders all the duties incumbent upon a wife, and knowing the husband to be a veritable deity, how can I ever neglect Rama, O venerable lady?" Kaushalya's heart was touched by Sita's reply. She shed tears born of both delight and agony, being moved by Sita's piety, and at the same time anguished at the thought of her imminent departure. Rama looked with affection at his mother. It was time for him to leave. He feared Kaushalya would pine away after he left. Rama stood before her with folded palms. "Please do not show my father's sad expressions, heightening his grief. 14 years will pass quickly. Even while you sleep, you will rise one morning to find me returned with Sita and Lakshman surrounded by friends and relatives." Rama looked around at all the royal ladies standing there and said, "Please forgive any unkind words or acts which I may have said or done out of ignorance. Because we have lived closely together, now I take leave of you all." A cry rose up from the ladies that resembled the cry of female cranes. Dasharatha's palace, which had always been marked with the joyous sounds of music and festivities, was now filled with the sound of agonized wails. Catching hold of Dasharatha's feet, Rama, Sita, and Lakshman took their final leave of him and walked around him in respect. Numbed by grief, Rama bowed to Kaushalya and climbed up onto the chariot, followed by Sita, and Lakshman followed them. His own mother Sumitra came up to say goodbye. Embracing her son, she said, "Serve well your elder brother Rama, my dear son. The eternal moral law states that the elder brother is the refuge of the younger, whether in good times or bad. Never forget the duties of our race, O Lakshman, which are to practice charity, perform sacrifices for the good of the people, and to lay down one's life on the field of battle." Blinded by tears, Sumitra allowed her son to mount the chariot as she called out, "Farewell, dear son, farewell. Always see Rama as you do your father Dasharatha. Look upon Sita as myself, your mother, and see the forest as Ayodhya." Sumantra took up the reins of the horses and urged them forward. The great golden chariot moved ahead with a thunderous rumbling. As it passed down the royal highway, the people assembled were stunned with sorrow. Both old and young alike rushed towards the chariot as thirsty men would rush toward water in the desert. Clinging to the sides and the back of the chariot, they looked up at Sumantra, calling out, "Hold fast the reins, O charioteer, and drive slowly. We wish to see Rama a little longer." Rama, anxious to be gone as quickly as possible, asked them to desist and told Sumantra to drive more swiftly. Ordered by Rama, "Move on," at the same time told by the people who filled the road, "Stop." Sumantra could do neither. With great difficulty, the chariot pressed slowly forward. Seeing Rama leaving and his city plunged into despair, the king fell prostrate. Upon being brought back to consciousness, he got up and, along with Kaushalya, ran after the chariot. Rama looked behind him and saw them trying to make their way through the crowd. He was unable to bear the sight of his father and mother in such distress, but being bound by duty, he urged Sumantra ever forward. The charioteer was perplexed. Hearing from behind the king calling out, "Come back," and then being ordered by Rama to drive quicker, Rama said to him, "This pain should not be prolonged further. Make haste. If my father reprimands you when you return, you should simply say you could not hear him." Finally, breaking free from the crowd, the chariot gathered speed and left the city. Dasharatha was still running along the road, his eyes fixed on the dust raised by the chariot's wheels. Breathless and at last losing sight of the chariot in the distance, Dasharatha fell down on the road. As he lay there, Kaushalya and Kaikeyi came to raise him up. On seeing Kaikeyi, however, the king became inflamed with anger. "Do not touch me, O sinful woman," he roared. "I never want to see you again. You are neither my wife nor relation, and I have nothing more to say to you. I also reject those who serve and depend upon you. If your son is in any way pleased to receive the sovereignty, then I shall shun him as well." Dasharatha gazed at the tracks of the chariot. He covered his face in shame, blaming himself for Rama's departure. With Kaushalya's help, he slowly made his way back to the palace. As he passed along the road, he saw the city marked by mourning, the shops closed, the streets deserted. Lamenting all the while, Dasharatha entered his palace as the sun goes behind a cloud. The great palace was silent and without movement. Overlaid with a heavy atmosphere of sorrow, Dasharatha went into Kaushalya's apartments and, laying down upon a soft couch, cried out, "O Rama, have you really deserted me? Alas, only those who will endure these coming 14 years will be happy, seeing again the face of my gentle son. I cannot tolerate life without that tiger among men. O wicked Kaikeyi, you may rule this kingdom as a widow." Kaushalya looked sadly upon her husband and said, "Having discharged her poison upon Rama, the crooked Kaikeyi will now wander freely like a female serpent who has shed her skin. With Rama exiled and her own son installed as king, surely she will cause further fear to breed, even like a snake living in one's own house. How shall I survive without Rama?" Thinking of Rama and Sita entering the forest, Kaushalya cried out in pain. How would they survive exactly at a time when they should have enjoyed the luxuries of life? They were banished and made to live like ascetics. When again would she see them? Surely in some past life she had committed some grievous sin. For that reason she now suffered such terrible pain. She lamented loudly, "O Rama, O Lakshmana, O Sita, where are you now?" The fire of my grief tortures me today as the blazing sun scorches the earth in summer. Sumitra gently reassured Kaushalya, reminding her of the greatness of Rama and Lakshman. Controlling her own grief and sitting next to Kaushalya, she placed her arms around her co-wife. She spoke about Rama, describing his qualities and immeasurable strength, simply to prove his noble father to be perfectly truthful. He had renounced the throne and gone to the forest. This was the path of virtue followed always by cultured men. That path led only to regions of never-ending happiness. Kaushalya should therefore not pity her son. Sumitra spoke softly, being ever attended by the loving Lakshmana and followed by his devoted wife. Rama will feel no discomfort. Even the sun will withhold its scorching rays from Rama's body, seeing his boundless virtues. A gentle and soothing breeze will always blow softly on Rama. At night, when he lies down to sleep, the cooling rays of the moon will caress him like a loving father. Sumitra stroked Kaushalya's face. She spoke to assuage her own suffering as much as that of Kaushalya. She told Kaushalya not to worry. Rama would surely be protected by the terrible weapons that Vishwamitra gave him. He would dwell fearlessly in the forest just as he would in his own palace. Sumitra concluded, knowing the power of that prince, I have no doubt we will see him return as soon as his term of exile is concluded. With Rama as your son, you should not grieve in the least, for your good fortune is very great indeed. Shed your sorrow now, O sinless lady, for all the people must be comforted by you at this time, pained as they are by Rama's separation. Comforted by Sumitra, Kaushalya felt relief and embraced her co-wife tightly. The two queens sat together for a long time, lost in thoughts of Rama. Nearby, the king lay almost unconscious on a couch, repeatedly murmuring Rama's name. So we have finished part 1. Now we are going to part 2, Exiled. We've made good progress unexpectedly. So now it's back to chapter 1 again, and the title is Into the Forest. I welcome you to read. Just use the raise hand function. You can just read a few paragraphs and stop, and somebody else will continue. If you don't feel like reading too many paragraphs. Just give me a minute. Part 2. Okay, this is chapter 1, Into the Forest. 1 minute. Mataji,
Yes, Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, chapter 1, Into the Forest.
Chapter 1, Into the Forest. After their father had returned, Rama and Lakshman felt the city and went along country paths toward the forest. Even though they urged Sumitra to drive quickly, a large number of citizens continued to follow them. Rama stopped to rest after some time and allowed the people to reach him. He said to them with affection, "You have shown your great love for me, beyond any doubt. Now for my pleasure, please bestow this same love upon my brother Bharata. I am sure he will take good care of you in every possible way. Although still a youth, he is old in wisdom and greatly heroic. He will prove a worthy master and dispel all your sorrows and fears. Serve him well, for he has been selected by our Lord, the Emperor. It is also my desire that all of you please him with your service. Be kind to the Emperor so that he may not suffer excessive agony in my absence." Rama tried hard to make the people turn back, but they would not return. The more Rama showed his determination to stick to the path of righteousness and truth, the more the people desired to have him as their ruler. It was as if Rama and Lakshman, by the cords of their virtuous qualities, had bound the people and were dragging them along. The chariot began to move forward again, and a group of elderly Brahmins, their heads shaking with age, ran behind, struggling to keep pace as the chariot picked up speed. They called out, "Oh, sweet steeds, stop, come back and be friendly to your master Rama, who is always intent on pleasing the Brahmins. Oh, horses, halt. Although endowed with excellent ears, Do you not hear our plaintive cry? You should not bear Rama away. He is pure-minded, heroic, and virtuous. Therefore, you should return him to the city to be our king, not carry him away to some distant lonely place." Rama looked back, feeling compassion for the distressed Brahmins. He did not want to ride himself while Brahmins walked, so he got down from his chariot and continued on foot. Although his heart was breaking to see the people's anguish, Rama looked straight ahead and walked with firm strides, followed by Sita and Lakshman. Sumatra drove slowly behind them in the chariot. As the Brahmins continued to besiege them, they gradually approached the banks of the river Tamasa. Searching out a suitable site, they decided to camp there for a night. The citizens of Ayodhya camped nearby. Rama released the horses and allowed them to drink the clear river water. After bathing, Rama spoke to Lakshman, indicating the forest across the water. "There lie the desolate woods, my brother, echoing in all sides with the sounds of birds and bees. The city of Ayodhya will similarly resound with the cries of forlorn men and women, lamenting for our having failed. I fear for my father and mother, who must be weeping incessantly and will perhaps even lose their sight." Rama thought of Bharata. By now he could have been informed of the situation. Thinking of Bharata's nobility, Rama felt reassured as he spoke with Lakshman. "I am sure the high-minded Bharata will take good care of our parents, consoling them in every way as I reflect upon Bharata's son's soft-heartedness and piety. My mind is pacified. My dear Lakshman, I am grateful you have chosen to follow me, for this too gives me solace. Fasting for this, our first night in the forest in accord with the scriptural quotes, I shall now sleep peacefully." Lakshman had Sumatra prepare a bed of leaves on the ground and Rama lay upon with Sita. He soon fell asleep, but Lakshman stayed awake, guarding his brother. Nearby, he could see the many fires lit by the people who were following Rama toward the forest. In the middle of the night, Rama rose again, spoke with his brother. "It seems there is no possibility of us convincing the citizens to return to their homes," he said, looking across to the place where the people had set the camp. "Just see the pains they are taking to follow us, sleeping now on the bare ground. Surely they would sooner give up their lives than go back to the city without us. Let us leave immediately while the people still sleep. They should not have to endure this austerity further on our behalf. As rulers of the people, it is our duty to eradicate our subjects' suffering. Certainly, we should not cause them pain. Thus, we must leave now and throw them off our trail." Lakshman agreed, and as Rama woke Sita, he rose to Sumatra and had him prepared the chariot. The two princes and Sita climbed aboard, and Sumatra drove it swiftly upstream, away from the sleeping people. The charioteer crossed a shallow part of the river and then, leaving the common road, drove through the woods, doubling back and going by different paths, sometimes riding through shallow waters for some distance. Sumatra made sure the people who are not able to track them. He drove quickly, and before dawn they had gone a considerable distance from where the citizens were camped. As dawn approached in the camp, the sound of numerous birds mingled and the lowing of the cows, which grazed freely on the riverbank. Roused by these sounds, the citizens arose and soon discovered that Rama and his party had left. They were shocked and began to loudly lament. They condemned sleep for having stolen Rama from them. Falling to the ground, they wept and said, "How could Rama, who is fit to rule the globe, put on the dress of an ascetic and live for distant lands? How did that jewel among men, who was like a loving father, go to the forest, leaving us forlorn? Let us now meet our end by fasting until death, or by setting out on the final great journey to the north." Looking all around, they found a big logs of dry wood. Some of them suggested they pile up the wood to make a funeral pyre and immediately enter it. What use was this left now? What could they say to their near and dear ones in Ayodhya when asked of Rama's whereabouts? How could they say they let him enter the forest even as they slept? When they returned without Rama, the city would surely become desolate and devoid of all happiness. Having gone out with the high-souled hero, firmly determined to follow him anywhere, how could they now go back without him? Continuously crying out, the citizens sought out the chariot's track and began to follow them. When they found themselves thrown out of the trail by Sumatra's expert driving, they became utterly despondent. Their anguished voices echoed around the woods. Alas, what shall we do? We are doomed by Providence. Gradually, the bewildered citizens began to reluctantly head back toward Ayodhya, following the tracks the chariot had made when leaving the previous day. Depressed and despairing, the citizens finally arrived at the city. They were blinded by grief and hardly able to distinguish between their own relatives and others. They searched for their homes with difficulty, some of them even entering the wrong houses. Afflicted with sorrow, they cast their eyes all around, and although the city and their houses were filled with abundant riches, to them it appeared vacant and nothing gave them pleasure. Ayodhya seemed at the time to be like the firmament bereft of the moon. Everywhere its citizens shed tears, and all of them felt like giving up their lives. No one rejoiced on any occasion, even when coming upon unexpected fortune or cooked food, and the household deities were neglected. Oh God. As the men returned home without Ram, their wives reproached them. Without saying, Rama, what is the use of our house, children, or wealth? The wives said. It seems the only virtuous man in the world is Lakshman, who has followed Rama to the forest in order to serve him. The men, pained by the loss of Rama, made no reply. Their wives lamented at length. How could they remain under the protection of the old king who had lost his good sense and sent Rama away? Worse still was the prospect of serving Kaikeyi, whose aim was not completely achieved. Having forsaken her husband and disgraced her family for the sake of power, who else would she not abandon? The ladies could not contain their feelings. Out of despair, they remonstrated with their husbands. Thanks to Kaikeyi, the kingdom will be ruined. With Rama gone, Dasaratha will soon meet his end along with his distinguished line, which has existed for so long. How can there be any good fortune with Kaikeyi in position of power? We should therefore end our lives, or we should follow Rama to some distant place where Kaikeyi's name will never be heard. The glorious and ever-truthful Rama shall be our only shelter. As the ladies of Ayodhya lamented, the sun gradually set on the city, leaving it dark and cheerless, its lights unlit and its temples and public meeting places deserted. Fallen upon evil days, the celebrated city became silent. The sounds of singing, rejoicing, instrumental music have ceased. All the people remained in their own homes thinking only of Rama. During the night, the chariot carrying the prince covered a long distance. As he traveled, Rama remembered the pain of his relations and people. Reflecting again and again upon his father's command, he kept his determination strong and urged Sumatra to drive swiftly. They passed many villages, seeing on their outskirts well-tilled and cultivated fields as well as beautiful blossoming woodlands. People from the villages to where the news of Rama's exile had already spread saw the chariot passing, and by and they censured the emperor and especially Kaikeyi, saying, the cruel Kaikeyi has acted without propriety. She has caused the exile of the highly virtuous Rama. What will become of us now? How will the delicate Princess Sita survive in the forest? How shameful that the king could abandon all affection for such a son and daughter-in-law. Going more slowly as he passed the people, Rama heard their comments and he smiled at them without saying anything. As the chariot moved on more swiftly, the travelers saw innumerable gardens, fruit orchards, and lotus points. The temple resonant with the sounds of sacred incantations were everywhere. While sitting in the chariot enjoying the sights of his flourishing kingdom, Rama thought of his coming exile. He would long for the day of his return to the prosperous land of Koshala. As they at last reached Koshala's southern border, Rama got down from the chariot and stood facing the direction of Ayodhya. With his face covered in tears, he spoke in a choked voice. I take leave of you, O farmers of cities, protected by the emperor and your preceding deities. May you fare well. When I have squared my debt to my father and fulfilled his pledge, I shall return. Many country dwellers had gathered around Rama. They were filled with grief to see him bid his sad farewell to Ayodhya. Rama glanced at them with affection. He thanked them for the love they showed for him and told them to go home. The people simply stood gazing at Rama, unable to move. Although he urged them and go, they stood rooted to the spot. They could not return away from the heroic and handsome prince. As they stood watching, Rama remounted his chariot and it disappeared into the distance, even as the sun sets at the end of the day. Gradually, the party reached the Ganges River in the Ushnara province. Along the banks of the river, for as far as the eyes could see in both directions, were clustered the hermitages of ascetic and rishis. Hundreds of hills ran along the length of the river, and the river flowed with cool water flecked with white foam, making a roaring sound as it rushed past. Somewhere the river ran still and deep, and somewhere else it dashed violently against the rocks. In places it was covered with white lotuses, while in others thousands of swans, cranes, and herons hovered over its waters. It was the resort of even gods and Gandharvas who spotted along its banks, surrounded by trees laden with fruits and flowers and full of varieties of singing birds. The river appeared most beautiful. Seeing this celestial region, Rama decided to stop for the night. He took shelter under the branches of a large tree and sat down to offer worship to the Ganges. Sumatra unyoked the horses and allowed them to drink and then roll on the grassy riverbank. The charioteer stood with folded hands near Rama, who sat peacefully with Sita by his side. The king of that territory was named Guha, a dear friend of Rama who ruled over the tribal people known as Nishadas. Hearing from his people of Rama's presence, he immediately went to him. Guha found Rama by the bank of Ganges and he stood at a distance, waiting respectfully for his audience. He was overjoyed to find his friend arrived in his kingdom, but this joy was mixed with sorrow at seeing him dressed as an ascetic. Rama looked up and saw Guha standing there, surrounded by his relations and elderly ministers. Quickly approaching him with Lakshman, he tightly embraced him and they exchanged greetings. Guha spoke to Rama, whom he had met on many occasions in Ayodhya when going there to pay tribute. I am honored by your presence in my kingdom. This land here is as much yours as it is mine. Indeed, I am your servant. Only order me and I shall immediately do whatever you wish. He showed Rama the many varieties of food and drink he had brought, as well as the excellent beds he had prepared for them. Rama thanked him and said, I have been well honored by you today. You should know that I am under a vow to live in the forest as an ascetic. I accept your offerings but allow you to take them back. Please leave only as much as may be taken by my horses. Since these steeds are dear to my father, you will please me by serving them well. Reluctantly, Guha commanded his man to do as Rama had requested, having the best of food brought for the horses. He watched the sadness and admiration as Rama accepted only water for himself and then lay down to sleep on a bed of leaves. Lakshman washed Rama's feet and again kept vigil nearby. Going over to Lakshman, Guha said, Here is a bed for you. There is no need to remain awake, for I shall stand here, bow in hand, and guard you all from danger. There is nothing in these woods unknown to me. Indeed, along with my men, I could withstand the attack of vast and powerful army coming upon this region. Guha took Lakshman by the arm and showed him the bed. But Lakshman politely refused the offer. Under your protection, we feel not even the least fear, O sinless Guha. By how can I rest while Rama and Sita lie down on the earth? Lakshman looked at his brother lying beneath the trees. His mind was troubled. How could one such as Rama, who was capable of withstanding even the gods in battle, be brought to such a state? Lakshman's thoughts drifted to Ayodhya. He became restless, thinking of his father and the subjects. Surely Dasaratha would soon breathe his last, having sent his dearest son to a life of severe austerity. Probably Kaushalya and the king would die that very night, uttering words of despair and anguish. Losing their beloved monarch after watching Rama depart, the people of Ayodhya would be seized with agony after agony. Engrossed in such thoughts, Lakshman breathed heavily like an infuriated serpent. Hot tears glided down his face. Guha placed an arm around his shoulder and gently reassured him. As the two men spoke, the night gradually slipped away. When dawn broke, Guha arranged for a large rowboat to ferry the prince across the fast-flowing Ganges. The time had arrived to leave the chariot and continue to foot. As the prince fastened on their armor and their weapons, Sumatra humbly approached them with joined palms and asked for instructions. Rama smiled and said, You have rendered me excellent service, O Sumatra. Please return now to the king's presence and inform him of our well-being. We shall now proceed on foot. Sumatra found it difficult to leave Rama. Gazing into his face, he spoke in an anguished voice. What a man in this world who has ever had to face such a preserved destiny, O Raghava. What is the value of cultivating piety and truth when we see such a result? We are actually lost and ruined by your departure. Coming under the control of the sinful Kaigeyi, we will simply suffer. Sumatra broke down and wept for some time, and Rama comforted him. As he gained his composure, Rama said, I cannot think of anyone who is a great friend to our family as you, O noble charioteer. Please act in a way which will not increase my father's grief. Whatever he instructs, should he be carried out without hesitation, even if he orders you to serve Kaigeyi. Rama understood all the nuances of statecraft. He was worried that in his absence, the king's ministers and servants might try to undermine Kaigeyi. He wanted the kingdom to run smoothly and his father to be spared an unnecessary anxiety in dealing with intrigues. Wanting also to ensure that his family not to be left anxious for his sake, Rama added, Please tell my father that neither Lakshman nor Sita nor I are grieving in any way. Happily do we commence our sojourn in these woods. The period of 14 years will soon pass and we shall return. Rama considered the urgent need to re-establish stability in Ayodhya. He spoke solemnly to Sumatra, asked the king to fetch Bharata quickly and duty install him as Prince Regent. Bharata himself should be told to accept the post without any hesitation, for this will be more pleasing to me. He should then serve the king and all the queens with an equal disposed mind. Rama gave his permission for Sumatra to leave, but the charioteer still stood before him, his mind perplexed. How could he return without Rama? He revealed his mind to Rama. As we leave the city, the people were practically rendered senseless with grief, even upon seeing you in this chariot. What then will be their state when they see the chariot returning empty? Surely Ayodhya will be torn in two, even as the army of a hero is split apart when it sees his chariot carrying only the charioteer, the hero having been slain. Sumatra thought of Dasharatha and Kaushalya. They would be devastated by grief when they heard that their son had actually entered the forest. Sumatra felt incapable of returning. He pleaded with Rama to let him go to the forest too. He was prepared to remain with Rama for the full 14 years rather than go back to Ayodhya without him. Falling to the ground and clasping Rama's feet, he spoke with pain in his voice. My desire is to convey you back to Ayodhya at the end of your exile. If I must return without you, then, seated upon the chariot, I shall enter blazing fire. I am your devoted servant, and it does not befit you to abandon me now. Let me follow you and render you every service. 14 years will be as many moments in your presence, while in your absence it will be seems like 14 ages. Rama was moved by the compassion for Sumatra, who was piteously supplicating him again and again. He lifted the weeping charioteer. I know your devotee will not be satisfied unless she sees the chariot return without me and hears from you of my entry into the forest. For the good of the king, I want her to be convinced that I have fulfilled the terms of her boons, and I also desire that his son Bharata be given the kingdom. Rama had really gone to the forest. Then, in the hope of his return, they would not install his brother Bharata. He therefore convinced Sumattra of the need for him to return to Ayodhya. Finally, assented and got up on the chariot. Rama then turned and spoke to Guha. It would be, I wish to go to some uninhabited part of the forest and live in a simple hermitage, gathering my daily food from wild roots and fruits. Rama knew that Guha and his people were hoping to accommodate him in a nearby wood, but he was devoted to virtue and wanted to properly follow the scriptural instructions, which prescribed a life of strict asceticism for one taking the vow of living in a forest. Using the sap of a banyan tree, Rama and Lakshman matted their hair into a thick mass. With their matted locks and their bark and grass garments, the two princes looked like a couple of aesthetic rishis. Rama helped Sita onto the boat and then jumped aboard himself along with Lakshman. Headed by Guha, the oarsman plied the boat out across the river. Rama waved to Sumatra, who stood motionless on the sandy riverbank, gripped by despondency. Should I continue, Mataji?
Let's just ask anyone, Mataji.
Okay.
Does anyone want to read?
Otherwise, I will continue.
Okay.
The boat approached the southern shore of the Ganges swiftly and smoothly. Sita folded her palms and prayed to the goddess of Ganga for protection in the forest. The river was placid and shone like a sheet of glass under the bright sun. Small ripples spread from the side of the boat as the oars gently and rhythmically splashed the water. Rama and Lakshman sat silent, thinking of Ayodhya and their family and friends. They watched as Sita sat in the prow of the boat, her eyes closed in prayer. Gradually, they approached the shoreline with its sprawling forest reaching practically to the river's edge. After the party disembarked, Rama said a fond farewell to Guha. He embraced the forest chieftain and then turned and walked toward the thick forest. Lakshman went ahead of him, placing Sita between them as they of parrots, the grunts of boars, the cries of monkeys, and the occasional growls and roars of tigers. Rama was apprehensive about Sita's safety. The vast and trackless forest lay immediately ahead. What dangers would they now have to face? But as they began to penetrate deep into the forest, Rama's fear for Sita gave way to delight. At last, the moment has arrived. His father's word would now be redeemed. Despite any danger, he would surely stay here for 14 years, thinking only of the glory of his aged and pious father. Keeping his mind fully alert, Rama gripped the great bow while hung up from his shoulder and placed his other hand on the hilt of the blue steel sword strapped to his belt. The three travelers had become hungry and they searched for roots and bulbs, fit for offering in the sacred fire. After they had cooked and made the offering, they ate. And when the meal was over, they performed their evening worship. Rama and Lakshman then sat together, and Rama spoke a little to his brother. Surely the king will sleep only fitfully tonight, O Lakshman. On the other hand, Kaigeyi will rest peacefully with her desired object fulfilled. Rama was pensive. Until now, he had now dwelt upon his own anxiety for fear of increasing the pain of those he loved. Now that he was finally in the solitude of the forest, he felt a deep disquiet. What other charitable suffering would Kaigeyi cause for his father? With Bharata installed as prince regent, perhaps she would even try to bring about Dasharatha's death, so that her own son might more quickly become the king. How could the king protect himself, being weakened by grief? What would become of his mother Kaushalya as well as Sumitra? Rama appeared anxious as he continued. I think that in the morning you should return to Ayodhya, O noble prince. Protect our mothers and our aged father. I do not see anyone else who can guard against Kaigeyi's evil intruders. Even now, she may be plotting to poison our parents. Although he felt helpless, Rama nevertheless censured himself for failing to secure his parents' happiness. Having undergone great pains to nurture him with love, they were deprived of his company just when they should have found their labors repaid. Alas, explained Rama, I am an ungrateful and useless son. Rama wept. He could by no means breach the order of Kaikeyi and his father, but he feared he might be acting wrongly if the result was his parents' death. Torn apart by his feelings, he wanted Lakshman to go back to Ayodhya to protect them. Rama lamented loudly for some time. When he fell silent, Lakshman replied, "Please do not grieve in this way, dear brother, as you simply cause grief for myself and Sita. It is not possible for me to leave you, as I would not survive even for a short while in your absence. Placing your faith in the pious Bharata, you should not send me away. I only wish to remain with you here and do not desire even the highest heaven without you." Mataji?
Yes, Mataji.
Shall I continue, Mataji?
Anyone likes to read? Yes, 1 minute, Mataji. Is anyone wanting to read? Wants to try? Anyone else?
No.
Are you tired, Mataji?
No, Mataji, I can read. Just let me know when to stop. The timing.
Oh yeah, it's 11:03. So maybe we should there's just a couple more paragraphs. We can finish it.
Okay, all right, Mataji. I'll do it fast. Yeah. Rama remained silent. He knew well that Lakshman would never leave him. It had grown dark, and the brothers sought the shelter of a large tree where Rama and Sita lay down to rest. Lakshman remained awake short distance away, vigilantly guarding them from any danger. Gradually, the full moon rose and shone through the branches of the high trees, illuminating the beautiful faces of Rama and Sita as they slept, which appeared to Lakshman like two more moons fallen to the earth. The following morning after sunrise, they went on to an easterly direction toward the confluences of the Ganges and the Yamuna. They were keen to find the hermitages of the rishis whom they knew lived in that region. The famous sage Bharadvaja, the leader of all the Brahmins inhabiting the forest, dwelt nearby. As they walked, they were enraptured by the colorful beauty of the forest. Huge trees rose up on all sides. In some places, the trees opened up into expansive clearings, carpeted by innumerable varieties of flowers and shrubs. Lakes of crystal clear water covered the white, blue, and reddish lotuses were seen here and there. The trees were laden with blossoms, filling the air with their fragrance. The sounds of cuckoos, parrots, and peacocks echoed all around. Keeping close together, the three travelers walked throughout the day, sometimes moving easily and on the other times with difficulty through densely wooded regions. Toward the end of the afternoon, they heard in the distance the sound of two rivers rushing to meet each other. Around them, they began seeing signs of life, chopped wood, and man-made paths. Catching sight of smoke rising above the trees, they realized they had found the dwellings of the rishis, and they quickly went toward them. As the prestige of the hermitage, they were greeted by a young ascetic who was a disciple of Bharadvaja. He led them through the many thatched cottages of the Brahmin community, showing them to a great sacrificial area where Bharadvaja was seated. Surrounded by his disciple, the sage sat before the sacred fire, absorbed in meditation. As soon as the three travelers caught sight of the effulgent rishi, they prostrated themselves on the earth in obeisance. They waited respectfully at a distance for the sage to beckon to them. Bharadvaja had attained virtual omniscience by his long practice of asceticism and meditation. He immediately sensed the presence of his exalted guests, and he rose up to greet them. Going before the sage, Rama said with joined palms, "We are Rama and Lakshman, the sons of Emperor Dasharatha. O highly venerable sage, here is my blessed and irreproachable wife, a princess of Videha and the daughter of King Janaka. Ordered by my ever-pious father, I have come to this forest to live the life of an ascetic for 14 years, and my brother and his wife have chosen to follow me. Please bless us." Bharadvaja gazed upon the faces of his guests, understanding their divine identities. He offered them various delicious foods prepared from wild roots and fruits. Tears flowed from his eyes as he spoke to Rama. I already knew of your exile and have been expecting you to pass this way. Your auspicious arrival here at my hermitage signals the success of all my austerities and sacrifices. It is highly difficult to have a sight of you, and today I am supremely blessed. My dear Rama, if you desire, you may remain here in the delightful stretch of land which is quite suitable for the life of asceticism. Smiling and gracefully accepting the sage's offerings of love, Rama replied, this hermitage is well known and not so far away from the state of Ayodhya. The people will soon seek me out if I remain here. Please tell me of some others, more lonely places, for I will not be able to tolerate the pain of the people again be seeing me to return. Bharadvaja understood the Rama's concern. He directed the prince to a mountain named Chitrakuta, lying some 50 miles away. After spending the night at the sage's hermitage, the three travelers set out the next morning toward the mountain. It lay across Yamuna, which they crossed by means of a raft constructed from the timber and bamboo. As they walked toward Chitrakuta, they saw countless varieties of trees and plants spreading everywhere in the tableaus of rich colors. The constant singing of thousands of birds resounded on all sides, mingling with the sounds of trickling rivulets and cascading waterfalls. From time to time, the trumpeting of an elephant could be heard in the distance. Branches of great trees were bent low under their burden of sweet fruits, for many of them hung large honeycombs, heavy with thick honey produced by the black bees droning around the fragrant forest flowers. Sita was captivated by the beauty of the forest, touching and smelling the many blossoms that hung all around. Completely forgetting his grief and anxiety, Rama laughingly held her hand and told her all the names of the trees and plants. The three travelers were elated simply to see such a celestial region. In great happiness, they moved toward Chitrakuta. The part of the forest leading to Chitrakuta had been rendered quite passable due to the regular traffic of ascetics, and the travelers made good progress. Toward the end of the third day of their departure from the Bharadvaja's hermitage, they approached the foot of the mountain. They saw there was a huge banyan tree which spread its branches of dark green leaves away in all directions. Bowing down to the preceding deity of the tree, Sita offered her respects. She prayed that they would successfully complete their exile and return that way again as their way back to Ayodhya. Lakshman prepared the beds of leaves near the foot of the tree. After saying their evening prayers and preparing a meal, the traveler rested for the night. Shall I continue, Mataji?
We can stop here, Mataji.
Okay, Mataji.
Please to stop because it's already 11:00. According to my time, it's 11:10. So
Okay,
we'll stop here. Thank you very much for your reading, Mataji. You read many paragraphs. In fact, almost the whole chapter. Thank you so much.
No problem, Mataji.
Our next reading will be, today's the last day we are reading for this week. And happy Sri Ramanavami, 10th April 2022 on Sunday. And those who live nearby Klang, please do come to our temple. I will give you the invitation again. If you're staying anywhere near the township of Klang, please do come. And our next reading is next Friday at 10 o'clock. We will continue reading the whole Ramayana every Friday from 10 to about 11:10. The most we will go is 11:15. 1 hour. We keep it to 1 hour. Sometimes slightly more than 1 hour, but not more than that. So I thank you all from my heart for coming for these Ramayana reading sessions, and I thank all of you, and I thank Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Bhakti Vigna Vinasha Narasimha Maharaj, for joining us. We're so fortunate and grateful and feel so blessed. Good night. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Mataji. Good night.
Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.